Hello, my name is George Geis, professor at UCLA Anderson, and I teach in the area of entrepreneurship, mergers and acquisitions, and accounting and finance. In this series of videos, we're going to introduce some very key concepts, some essential concepts in the area of finance and accounting. Our goals for this session is to help you build confidence in reading and understanding the balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement. You can think of these three statements as if they were a tripod with three legs. And these three statements hold up essentially the communication that you will want to make to key constituencies that you will be working with in your entrepreneurial venture. We want to see how these financial statements are linked to operating activities of an entrepreneurial venture. In other words, they just don't come out of thin air. In fact, there's a key connection between the core activities of an entrepreneurial venture and these financial statements. And finally, we want to understand the role of financial statements in communicating. The operative word here is communication, the company's results to major constituencies. Now, communicating information about companies to interested parties like investors and other parties, yourself included, or banks, is a key role of the financial statements. I recall an aunt that I visited quite frequently, living in the northwest of the United States, Portland, Oregon. And whenever I would visit her, there was a routine that got established. The routine was she would bring out some coffee and cookies as I first visited my Aunt Blanche. And after about 10 minutes, she would start bringing out her annual reports for companies that she was interested in investing in. And she had lots of questions about the various aspects, whether they be the balance sheet, the income statement, cash flow statement. And we would go over these, and it seems like she would sometimes, as I would visit her, ask me the same questions time and time again. But the point was that she was interested in growing and learning about how these financial statements can communicate to key constituencies what's happening inside a company, whether you be an investor, whether you be a banker, whether you be a manager. The operative word here is communications. Now, you want to present financial results of the venture in a meaningful way. And there's numbers involved, but also there's the story behind the numbers, which becomes very important as you communicate your venture's information, financial information, to important constituencies. I like to compare it to a baseball box score, in which you have things like at-bats, runs, hits, RBIs. Now, you may not have been at the baseball game, but the fact that you can read a baseball box score can communicate to you a lot about what happened at the game, even though you weren't there. The same thing's true about a soccer box score, a football box score. Shots on goals, goals scored, assists, whatever we want to say. To be able to read the key reporting information about the sports event may not be three-dimensional. It's not as good as being at the game. But nevertheless, it can communicate to you a lot about what did occur at the game, or in the case of a financial statement, inside of a company. Now, there's three major domains which we want to understand and discuss when we talk about financial statements. We have an investing domain, a financing domain, and an operation or an operating domain. Now, as we will see, that these three major domains of an entrepreneurial venture drive the financial statements that will come out reporting the results of the venture. The financing domain. There's two major places in which entrepreneurial ventures can obtain financing. You as an entrepreneur can get it from owners. That may include yourself, your own funds. It may include other investors that provide angel funds to support you. In exchange for stock or ownership, they are going to provide you with funding. Now, this funding typically is not repaid at any particular date. It's equity, it's ownership, and it's not necessarily forced repayment. Now, it may receive dividends. Now, in the case of an entrepreneurial venture, it's pretty rare that dividends are paid early in the venture because most of the funds are being used by the entrepreneur. But as the firm matures, it may or may not receive dividend. In some cases, it will as the company gets more mature. Then there's creditors, people who provide you with funds under agreement. Your suppliers can provide you with credit. They provide you with materials, with inventory, on account, accounts payable. A bank can provide you a line of credit or note. Now, with respect to creditors, funds are typically repaid, maybe with interest at a specified date. Now, if it's an account payable, a supplier is giving you 30, 60 days to pay. Oftentimes, there's no interest associated with shorter term type of obligations, but with longer term, there's typically interest associated with these. That's financing. That's the financing domain. And we're going to see shortly that, in fact, this domain is going to drive part of a major financial statement. Then there's the investing domain. The investing domain means that you're going to put in place investments that are going to be necessary for you to carry out your company's business activities. You may invest in land and buildings and equipment, in patents or licenses, in inventory, in accounts receivable. In other words, you're giving your customers time to pay. That's an investment. Or you might invest in cash. Now, that may sound like a strange investment in a sense that it may not be bringing you any return, but nevertheless, cash is a vehicle by which business is conducted. It's in essence, it allows you the flexibility to do lots of other activities. So therefore, ventures, in some cases, some ventures have kept enormous amounts of cash on their balance sheet, giving them the flexibility to do things in the future. Now, there's a prime directive for an entrepreneurial investing portfolio. If you're going to put together a venture, there's a prime equation which you want to consider, which drives activities and hopefully works for you. And that is your return on this set of investments that you put together. The financial return is going to be greater than your cost of your financing. Now, this is very interesting because in an entrepreneurial venture, sometimes your cost of financing can be quite high. For example, I've known entrepreneurs that have taken out credit card debt, paid 18, 21% as a cost of financing. You know, that can work as long as you are putting together a portfolio or set of investments which is going to earn a higher rate of return than your cost of financing. Now, you don't want to stay with such a high cost of financing forever. You want to drive down your cost of financing. But sometimes to get started, an entrepreneur is willing to take a lot of risk associated with a high cost of financing, given the fact that they're reasonably comfortable that they can earn a return on investment that is higher than at cost of financing. So this is kind of a prime directive that's associated with an entrepreneurial venture. Now, once you have done financing and once you've made your investments, now it's time to operate. Now, operating activities within the company are those that are necessary for you to provide your product or service and generate revenue. They include things such as you purchase. You may purchase inventory. You may purchase materials. You produce. You may develop your product or service. Sometimes if you're a service-based business, production means putting the team together to deliver the service that's required. You market. You provide a set of activities which essentially allow you to leverage the investment base that you put together to move the venture forward. And then you administrate. In other words, you manage. You manage this portfolio of investments in such a way that it works together coherently and cohesively. Now, here is one of the key points which we'll be stressing, and we're going to come back and build upon this in our next video. The financial statements are a form of communication. You want to understand these just like my Aunt Blanche did, to be able to communicate and understand what's happening inside a venture. Communicating to your investors, communicating to your lenders, your bankers, communicating to your partners, communicating to yourself. The financial statements address three major domains, and we'll see these keep popping up in the videos that we'll be doing. The financing domain, the investing domain, and the operating domain. Now, we're going to see in the next video, looking ahead a little bit, that the financial statements come out of these basic business activities, these core business activities which we've been describing. And we're going to see that the financial statements simply don't come out of thin air, but they actually are derived very closely from these core business activities.